The biting Chicago wind gnawed at the edges of the parking lot as Daniel Carter stepped out of the 7-Eleven, his Burberry coat flapping against his Italian leather shoes. At 48, the tech mogul was used to the weight of his Rolex, but nothing prepared him for the weight of what he saw next. There beside his Tesla Model X stood a child no taller than the bumper, her knuckles raw from scrubbing windshields, with a gas station receipt. "Just need milk for my baby brother," she whispered, her voice swallowed by the rumble of an L train passing overhead. The words hit Daniel like a freight train. Suddenly, he wasn't standing on Michigan Avenue anymore. He was 9 years old again, stealing ketchup packets from a McDonald's to make tomato soup for his sister. The girl's frozen fingers fumbled with a rag, as Daniel knelt, his knees cracking against the asphalt. Up close, he noticed the hospital bracelet still clinging to her wrist. "Who put you up to this, kiddo?" he asked, pressing a steaming hot cocoa into her hands. The scent of chocolate mixed with the iron tang of blood from her cracked lips. She hesitated, then pointed to a shadowy figure in a beat-up Ford across the lot, a man with a familiar snake tattoo coiling up his neck. Daniel's stomach dropped. He knew that ink. It belonged to the same foster father who'd made him panhandle outside Wrigley Field 20 years ago. "Look at me, Lucy," Daniel said, using the name he'd glimpsed on her bracelet. He slipped his coat around her shoulders, the wool swallowing her whole. "You ever heard of a thing called karma?" As the man in the Ford lit a cigarette, Daniel pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used since his own rescue, Detective Martinez, now head of Chicago's trafficking unit. The girl's eyes widened when he whispered, "Remember that story about the kid who got away? Turns out he grew up to buy the whole damn system." Outside, snow began to fall, each flake melting against the Tesla's hood, where Lucy's rag had left streaks, not of dirt, but of hope. The door creaked open to reveal Rick Dawson's hulking frame, his knuckles scarred from bar fights, and his breath reeking of cheap whiskey. But it wasn't just the alcohol that hit Daniel. It was the framed photo on the wall behind Rick's cracked glass, obscuring the face of a woman who could only be Lucy's mother. The resemblance was uncanny, right down to the same defiant glint in the eyes. "You her social worker or something?" Rick sneered, his grip tightening around a half-empty beer bottle. Lucy shrank behind Daniel's leg, her tiny fingers digging into his slacks. Daniel's voice dropped to a dangerous calm, the kind he used before firing incompetent executives. "No, I'm the guy who's about to make you an offer you can't refuse." He reached into his coat pocket, not for his wallet, but for the dog-eared photo he always carried, a snapshot of himself at 9, standing in this very neighborhood holding a stolen loaf of bread. Rick's bloodshot eyes flickered with recognition. "Wait, you're that scrawny kid from the—" A crash from the bedroom cut him off. A toddler's wail pierced the air, followed by the sound of shattering glass. Lucy gasped. "Jakey!" She darted past Rick before anyone could stop her. Daniel followed his polished shoes, crunching over broken toys and moldy takeout containers. In the corner of the filthy room, a boy no older than 3 stood barefoot in a pile of broken picture frames, his arms streaked with fresh cuts. The sight sent Daniel back to his own childhood, the sting of broken glass, the silence of adults who didn't care. Rick lumbered into the doorway, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Ain't my fault the little idiot can't stay in his crib." That's when Daniel noticed the chain latch on the toddler's bedroom door, the kind used for dogs. His vision went red at the edges. In one fluid motion, he yanked out his phone and hit record. "Say that again," he dared Rick, angling the camera to capture the chain, the bruises on Jake's wrists, the squalor. "I want the whole world to see what kind of monster locks up babies." Rick lunged, but Daniel was faster. He'd spent 20 years in boxing gyms, purging his rage. The punch landed with a satisfying crack, sending Rick sprawling into a tower of unpaid bills and empty liquor bottles. As the man groaned on the floor, Daniel turned to Lucy, who was clutching her brother to her chest. "You're coming with me," he said, scooping Jake into his arms. The toddler's tiny hands clung to his tie like a lifeline. Outside, the first responders were already pulling up. Daniel had texted Detective Martinez the address the second he'd seen that chain. Rain pelted the windshield as Daniel buckled the kids into the Tesla's back seat. Lucy stared at him, her voice barely a whisper. "You're really taking us." Daniel wiped blood from his split knuckle and met her gaze. "Kid, I'm buying you a damn house." The engine roared to life, drowning out the sound of Rick's curses as the cops dragged him away. Somewhere in the chaos, the cracked photo of Lucy's mother fell from the wall, shattering completely. A ghost finally laid to rest. The elevator doors hadn't even fully closed when Daniel's phone buzzed an alert from the security app linked to Lucy's hospital bracelet. Her heart rate was spiking. He slammed his palm against the emergency stop button, the sudden halt mirroring the way his stomach dropped. The grainy live feed showed Rick dragging Lucy by the arm, her small frame crumpling as she tried to shield Jake with her body. But it was the glint of the hunting knife on the cluttered coffee table that made Daniel's blood turn to ice. He was already dialing 911 when the elderly neighbor's words echoed in his mind. "Come back before it's too late." The garage door of his penthouse hadn't fully lifted before Daniel gunned the Tesla into the rain-slicked streets, tires screeching against asphalt. His dashboard screen lit up with an incoming call, Detective Martinez. "Carter, we've got units en route, but there's a problem." The detective's voice crackled through the speakers. "That building's in legal limbo. Landlord's MIA, no proper lease paperwork. If Dawson claims squatters' rights—" Daniel cut him off. "I own the building." The lie rolled off his tongue effortlessly. He would own it by morning. His assistant was already drafting the offer. The Tesla swerved around a corner, hydroplaning through a puddle that sprayed the sidewalk. A flash of movement caught his eye, a shadowy figure darting from the apartment's fire escape. Daniel's foot jammed the brake. There, limping down the alley in nothing but a soaked pajama top, was Jake. The toddler's bare feet left smears of blood on the wet pavement. Daniel was out of the car before it fully stopped, scooping Jake into his arms. The child's whimpers were barely audible over the storm. "Lucy, lock the bad door," Jake gasped, pressing his face into Daniel's neck. "She said run." The apartment window exploded outward in a shower of glass. Rick's enraged roar tore through the night. Daniel shoved Jake into the Tesla, engaging child lock with shaking fingers. "Stay. Breathe," he ordered the hyperventilating toddler, then sprinted toward the building. Inside, the scene was worse than he'd imagined. Rick had Lucy pinned against the moldy wall, her arm twisted at a sickening angle. But it was Lucy's face that stopped Daniel cold. Not fear, but fury. She spat in Rick's eye. "My real dad's coming," she hissed, "and he's gonna burn you." Rick never saw the sucker punch coming. Daniel's fist connected with the man's temple, sending him crashing into the unstable bookshelf. As Rick groaned amid an avalanche of old magazines and liquor bottles, Daniel yanked Lucy into his arms. Sirens wailed in the distance. "You lied," Daniel whispered against Lucy's hair, his voice breaking. "I'm not your dad." Lucy clung to him, her fingers digging into his shoulders like she was drowning. "You came back," she choked out. "That's what dads do." Outside, the first police cruiser skidded to a halt, its spotlight cutting through the rain. In that harsh light, Daniel saw the truth written all over Lucy's face. The bruises, the hunger, the years of being told she was worthless. And he made a silent vow, not to the universe, but to her. No one would ever make her feel small again. Not while he had breath in his body. The Tesla's door clicked open behind them. Jake's tiny voice piped up, "Dada home now." Daniel didn't correct him. The teacup trembled in Daniel's hands as the neighbor's security feed flickered to a new angle. Rick now pacing near the window, his shadow stretching like a monster across the peeling wallpaper. Then came the sound that made Daniel's spine lock, a whimper, high-pitched and stifled, as Jake crawled out from under the coffee table, clutching a moldy teddy bear missing an eye. Rick's boot came down inches from the toddler's fingers. "Should have drowned you like the runt you are," he muttered before kicking the bear across the room. Daniel was halfway to the door when the old woman grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "Wait!" She hobbled to a closet, pulled out a shoebox. Inside lay a stack of Polaroids, Emma at 3 grinning in a sunflower dress. Jake as a newborn, swaddled in a hospital blanket. Their mother's face radiant in the last photo before the cancer took her. Maria begged me to keep these safe, the woman whispered. Said if anything happened. Her knobby finger tapped the back of a photo where a phone number was scrawled. That's her sister in Milwaukee. Been fighting for custody since the funeral, but Rick's got connections at the courthouse. A crash came through the monitor, Rick overturning the TV stand, screaming about useless brats, as Emma shielded Jake with her body. Daniel's phone was already dialing the number when he noticed the timestamp on the security feed, 11:47 p.m., past curfew. His blood ran cold. Why's she awake? It's a school night. The neighbor's face crumpled. He makes her clean the building's stairwells after dark. Says it's rent. Last week old Mr. Jenkins found her passed out by the dumpster hypothermia. The call connected. A woman's voice groggy with sleep. Hello. Daniel didn't bother with pleasantries. I've got your niece and nephew. Meet us at Chicago General Hospital in 2 hours. He hung up, already texting his lawyer, call Judge Carmichael. Wake him if you have to. We're invoking emergency kinship placement under Statute 203.5. Down the hall, Rick's voice escalated. Think you're smart, huh? A slap rang out. Emma's cry was muffled, probably by a hand over her mouth. Daniel was moving before he could think, but the neighbor blocked him again, shoving a key into his palm. Fire escape leads to their bedroom window. Maria had it installed after Rick locked her in the closet for 2 days. Her roomy eyes gleamed. Bring my babies home. The steel stairs groaned under Daniel's weight as he climbed the freezing rain needling his skin. Through the cracked window, he saw Jake curled in a laundry pile, his breath coming in wheezes. Asthma untreated by the looks of the empty inhaler discarded nearby. Emma knelt on the floor, scrubbing at a wine stain on the carpet, while Rick loomed over her with a belt. Daniel didn't knock. The window shattered under his elbow glass, scattering across the threadbare rug. Rick whirled, belt raised, but froze when he saw the Polaroids in Daniel's hand. Maria's sister's on her way, Daniel said softly, with police and a malpractice lawsuit against the judge who gave you custody. He stepped closer, letting Rick see the murder in his eyes. But here's the real question, do you want to meet them, or the guys I paid to lose you in Lake Michigan? Emma's gasp was the only sound. Then Jake coughed a wet rattling sound that decided everything. Daniel scooped him up, wrapped Emma in his coat, and didn't look back as Rick's screams followed them into the storm. The Tesla's heater roared to life. As Emma pressed Jake's inhaler to his lips, stolen from Rick's jacket, Daniel noted with pride. She whispered, "You came through the window like Mommy promised." She touched the Polaroid of her mother still clutched in Daniel's hand. She said angels would look like that. Daniel didn't correct her. He just hit the gas, watching in the rear view as the neighbor's light flickered twice their agreed signal. Safe. The hospital loomed ahead, its ER lights cutting through the rain like a beacon. Like a beginning. The moment Michael stepped into Samantha Lee's office, the high-powered attorney took one look at his face and slid a file across her mahogany desk. I pulled Rick Dawson's records. It's worse than we thought. The folder contained photos of a storage unit, stacked crates of counterfeit prescription pads, and a ledger with initials matching a notorious Back Bay pill mill. He's not just a drunk, Samantha said, tapping a surveillance photo of Rick exchanging envelopes with a man in a Red Sox cap. He's a runner for the O'Malley crew, and he's using that apartment as a drop point. Michael's knuckles turned white around the armrest. On the drive over, he'd rehearsed a dozen legal strategies. Now they all evaporated. The law moved too slow for what Emma needed. Across town in that locked bedroom, she was probably. His phone buzzed with a notification. The neighbor's security app showed a new alert motion detected in 2B's hallway. The feed loaded to reveal a hulking figure in a leather jacket, sliding an envelope under Rick's door. But it was the glint of metal at the man's waist that made Michael's breath hitch. Samantha saw it too. We call the cops now, and O'Malley's boys will have Rick out on bail before CPS finishes their paperwork. She met Michael's gaze. You know what happens to snitches in those situations, especially ones with vulnerable dependents. The unspoken truth hung between them. Michael stood abruptly, his chair screeching. Then we don't play by their rules. He tossed his keys on the desk. How fast can you get an emergency custody order if I bring you the kids? Samantha didn't blink. 12 minutes, but Michael... He was already at the door. "Tell Judge Carmichael to expect company." Rain sheeted against the Bentley's windshield as Michael sped toward Charlestown. His Bluetooth connected to an unexpected call, Father Callahan from St. Agnes, the shelter that saved him 30 years ago. "Heard you're stirring up trouble." The priest chuckled, but his tone turned grave. "The O'Malleys own 2 cops in that precinct. Whatever you're planning, lad, make it airtight." Michael's grip tightened on the wheel. "I just need a distraction at St. Mary's shelter in 15 minutes. Can you—" "Consider it done." The line went dead. When Michael arrived, the apartment building was eerily quiet. No lights in 2B's windows, no blaring TV, just the distant wail of sirens heading toward St. Mary's right on schedule. He took the fire escape stairs 2 at a time, the neighbor's key burning a hole in his pocket. The bedroom window opened with barely a sound. Inside, Emma sat bolt upright on her bare mattress. Jake clutched to her chest. Her lips formed the word "angel" before recognition dawned. Michael pressed a finger to his lips just as the front door burst open, Rick in leather jacket arguing about missing product. "Time to go," Michael whispered, lifting Jake into his arms. But Emma hesitated, pointing to the closet. Behind a stack of moldy blankets sat a Hello Kitty backpack bulging with something heavy. Michael unzipped it to find Rick's ledger, names, dates, and dollar amounts in a child's painstaking handwriting. "He made me copy it," Emma whispered. "Said I had small fingers for details." The front door slammed. Footsteps approached. Michael shoved the ledger into his coat just as the bedroom lock jiggled. "Play along," he breathed, pulling Emma behind him as the door flew open. Rick froze, his bloodshot eyes darting from Michael to the open window. "You." "Evening, Dawson." Michael's voice could have iced over hell. He held up his phone, displaying Samantha's face on a video call and the custody order time-stamped 3 minutes prior. "Meet your new landlord, and the woman who just legally emancipated these children from your care." Leather jacket reached for his piece, but Rick caught his arm. "That's Grant, the guy who owns half the North End." Fear cut through his drunken haze as he registered the implications. No judge, no cop, no gangster could touch a man with Michael's resources. Emma stepped forward, her voice clear as a bell. "He's taking us to Disneyland." She smiled for the first time in years. "You should see the look on your face." The slam of police radios echoed from the stairwell, real cops summoned by Samantha, the second the custody order cleared. Michael herded the kids toward the fire escape as Rick shouted obscenities. At the window, Emma turned back. "Bye, Rick. Hope prison has good TV." Outside, the first snow of December began to fall, dusting the Bentley's roof like powdered sugar. Jake giggled as Michael buckled him in. "Snoo." Emma touched the backpack between them, her eyes too old for 8. "This proves it right, that he can't ever come back." Michael started the engine, watching in the rear view as cops swarmed the building. "Sweetheart, after what you've given us, he'll be lucky to see sunlight before 2040. The heater roared to life. As they pulled away, Emma finally let herself cry, not the silent tears of survival, but great heaving sobs of relief. Michael didn't hush her. He just turned up the radio, letting Aretha Franklin's voice fill the car with something they'd all been missing: hope. The homeless woman's gnarled fingers clutched at Michael's sleeve as he passed. "You lookin' for our little sparrow?" She rasped, her breath smelling of peppermint and poverty. When Michael nodded, she dug into the layers of her stained coat and produced a crumpled napkin, Emma's childish scrawl visible beneath ketchup stains. "Mr. Grant, he took my shoes, says I don't need 'em if I'm not leavin'." Michael's phone vibrated, a text from Samantha with a screenshot of Rick's latest Facebook post. "Rich pervert stalking my kids, CPS investigation pending." The attached photo showed Emma's tear-streaked face, photoshopped into Michael's Bentley with sinister red arrows pointing at his hands on the wheel. The comments section was a wildfire of outrage. Then came the kicker, a forwarded email from Rick to the local news station. "Interview me about this billionaire predator tomorrow at noon. I got proof." The old woman tapped the napkin again, revealing a second message hidden in the folds. "He's making me lie for the camera tomorrow." Ice flooded Michael's veins. He dropped a $100 bill into the woman's cup. "If you see Emma before I do—" "Already got my eyes open, sugar." She winked, tucking the money away. Ain't my first rodeo with men like Rick. As Michael sprinted toward his car, his phone rang. An unknown number. He answered to hear labored breathing, then Emma's whisper, "He's got a gun under the couch, says he'll use it if you come back." The line went dead before he could respond. Downtown, Samantha was already in motion, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "We need leverage now," she hissed. "That proof Rick has, it's probably staged, but the court will still—" Michael slammed his fist on her desk, making her coffee cup jump. Screw the courts. He pulled up the security footage from his penthouse building, time-stamped 2 hours ago. There, clear as day, was Rick's leather-jacketed friend breaking into Michael's parking garage. "They're planting evidence. Probably drugs or worse in my car right now." Samantha's grin was razor-sharp. "Perfect." She dialed 911. "Yes, officer, I'd like to report a breaking and entering at 200 Clarendon Street. The suspect matches the description of a known O'Malley associate." As she spoke, Michael's Uber pulled up outside. He had one stop to make before midnight, the back booth of Sully's bar, where Rick's estranged brother drank away his guilt every Thursday. The man looked up as Michael slid a photo across the sticky table. 8-year-old Rick in a hospital gown, his arm in a cast from their father's discipline. "You want to save your niece from becoming him." Michael pushed a burner phone forward. "Then call me the second Rick leaves for that interview." The brother's hands shook as he picked up the phone. Outside, thunder rolled, the first drops of rain hitting the pavement like tiny warnings. Tomorrow would be a bloodbath. But tonight was for ghosts and gambles. Michael stepped into the storm, the homeless woman's napkin burning a hole in his pocket. Somewhere in the city, a little girl was practicing lies at gunpoint, and he'd be damned if he let the cameras roll. The moment they stepped inside, the social worker's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating something that made Michael's blood run cold. A child-sized suitcase by the door, tagged with a shipping label, "Property of R. Dawson. Delivery to 47th St. Warehouse. Fragile." Mrs. Albright's professional mask slipped for just a second. "Where is Emma, Mr. Dawson?" Rick smirked, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Sleepover." Then came the sound, a whimper so faint it could have been a mouse. But Michael knew that sound. He'd made it himself 30 years ago, curled under his father's workbench. He lunged past Rick toward the closet, ignoring the cop's shout. The door was padlocked. "Open it." Michael's voice was barely human. Rick crossed his arms. "Ain't my key." That's when the social worker pulled out bolt cutters from her bag, standard issue for DCF in this district, Michael would later learn. The snap of the lock echoed like a gunshot. Inside, Emma crouched in a nest of dirty laundry, her wrists zip-tied to a pipe. Duct tape covered her mouth, but her eyes screamed louder than any voice. The flashlight caught the bruises forming on her arms in perfect hand-shaped patterns. The cop had Rick in cuffs before he could blink. "You're under arrest for child endangerment, unlawful restraint, and—" "Wait." Michael knelt gently, peeling the tape from Emma's mouth. Her first words weren't help or thank you. They were, "Jake's in the truck." Samantha was already dialing 911 for backup when headlights flooded the apartment, a battered U-Haul idling at the curb. Through the rain-streaked window, they saw a shadowy figure loading crates into the back. Michael didn't think. He ran. The U-Haul's cargo door was halfway closed when he wrenched it open. There, between stacks of counterfeit pharmaceuticals, sat Jake in a dog crate, his tiny fingers gripping the wires, face streaked with tears. And standing over him, the same leather-jacketed man from the security footage, a syringe in his hand. "One move and the kid gets a vacation," the man sneered, pressing the needle to Jake's neck. That's when Emma's voice rang out from behind Michael, clear as a bell. "Uncle Danny, Mommy said you'd come." The man froze. Recognition flickered across his face. The syringe clattered to the floor as Jake tumbled into Michael's arms. Back in the apartment, Rick was screaming about breach of contract to the stone-faced cop. But Michael only had eyes for Emma as she clung to Jake, her whisper barely audible over the sirens. "I told you angels were real." The social worker's pen hovered over her clipboard. "Where should we take them tonight, Mr. Grant?" Michael didn't hesitate. He pulled out the Polaroid of Maria's sister from his pocket, the one the neighbor had given him. "We've got family waiting in Milwaukee." As the squad car pulled away with Rick, Emma pressed her face to the Bentley's window. Not to watch her tormentor disappear, but to count the raindrops, each one a tear she didn't have to cry anymore. And in that moment, Michael knew this wasn't an ending. It was the first page of a story where the monsters lost and the angels wore slightly wrinkled suits. The grandfather clock in Michael's penthouse struck 3 a.m. when the whimpers began, not from Emma's room, but from the walk-in pantry. He found her there, knees drawn to her chest, surrounded by half-opened cans of soup and cereal boxes. He said, I ate too much. She hiccuped her fingers, clutching a jar of peanut butter like it might vanish. Michael didn't tell her she was safe now, didn't promise she'd never go hungry again. Instead, he grabbed 2 spoons and sat cross-legged on the marble floor. Know what my foster mom used to make at 3 a.m.? He pried open a can of condensed milk, dipping his spoon in. Sugar sandwiches, bread butter, and this straight from the can. Emma's tear-streaked face tilted. That's gross. Damn right. He handed her the other spoon. Try it. As they sat there in the glow of the sub-zero fridge sticky fingers and all Michael's phone buzzed with Samantha's update, Judge approved the emergency hearing for tomorrow. Rick's lawyered up with O'Malley's guy. Emma must have seen the tension in his jaw. She reached over, leaving a tiny peanut butter fingerprint on his screen. You're gonna win, she said with the absolute certainty only children possess. You got the magic spoon. He almost laughed until he saw what she meant, the silver monogrammed spoon from his place setting now crusted with condensed milk. The same spoon his foster mother had used to teach him that food wasn't something you earned. The courtroom the next morning was a study in contrasts. Rick's new lawyer, a slick-haired shark with O'Malley's signature pinky ring, leaned over to whisper something that made Rick smirk. On the other side, Emma sat swinging her legs in a sunflower yellow dress, courtesy of Samantha's 2 a.m. Target run, clutching that filthy teddy bear. Then the evidence played. Security footage from Michael's building showed Rick's associate planting drugs in the Bentley. The neighbors' recordings revealed Rick coaching Emma to lie about abuse. But the knockout punch came from an unexpected source, the homeless woman from the corner, now clean and sober in a borrowed blazer, holding up Emma's napkin note. He's making me lie for the camera. When the judge granted permanent custody, Rick exploded. This is bullshit. That bastard's buying everyone off. That's when Emma did the unthinkable. She walked right up to Rick, her chin high, and whispered something that turned his face to ash. Later in the car, Michael had to know. What did you say to him? Emma buckled her seatbelt with a click. Told him I hid Mommy's phone in the teddy bear. She unzipped the bear's back, revealing a thumb drive taped inside. The one with all his real business calls. As they pulled away from the courthouse, Michael glanced in the rear view. The bear sat proudly on the console, its matted fur and missing eye a stark contrast to the Bentley's polished leather. Kinda like them, a little broken, a little messy, but finally home. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. Or maybe it was just the sound of 1,000 breadcrumbs finally leading someone where they needed to be. The visitation room's fluorescent lights hummed like angry bees as Rick swaggered in, his new lawyer smirking behind him. Michael noticed 3 things immediately: Rick's freshly blackened eye, courtesy of his O'Malley friends, the way his fingers twitched toward his belt, and the small bulge in his jacket pocket. Emma's grip on Michael's hand turned vice-tight. 5 minutes, the social worker said, eyeing Rick with open distrust. Supervised, no physical contact. Rick leaned across the table, his breath reeking of mouthwash masking vodka. Miss me, princess. Emma didn't flinch. She reached into her own pocket and slammed down a folded piece of paper, the shipping label from the suitcase. You forgot this. Rick's face purpled. You little... That's enough. Michael stood, blocking Emma from view. But it was the click from Rick's pocket that made his blood freeze. A phone recording. Of course, O'Malley's crew needed proof Emma was unharmed to keep the trafficking charges at bay. Emma, though, she was already 2 steps ahead. With the innocent smile of a child showing off a crayon drawing, she held up her own phone, playing Rick's voice from the hidden recordings in her teddy bear. I'll sell you the girl for $5,000. She's small, but she works hard. The social worker's coffee cup hit the floor. Chaos erupted. Rick lunged, his lawyer shouted about entrapment. But the real masterpiece was Emma pressing send on a pre-drafted email, forwarding the audio file to every news outlet in Boston. Outside in the hall, as cops dragged Rick away, Emma finally let herself shake. Michael scooped her up, pressing her face into his shoulder so she wouldn't see the handcuffs. "You," he whispered, "are terrifying." Emma wiped her nose on his tie. "You gave me the phone." That night, as the story exploded across every news channel, Michael found Emma sitting cross-legged on his penthouse balcony, her teddy bear propped up like a guest of honor. She was teaching it how to properly dunk Oreos in milk. "Uncle Mike." She didn't look up from her important work. "Can we get a dog, a big one? That bites." Michael stared at the skyline at the city that had once been his kingdom of steel and silence. Now it was just the backdrop for something far more extraordinary. "We'll go tomorrow," he said, and for the first time in his life he realized he wasn't making a promise. He was making a plan. The moment they stepped outside the CPS building, Emma stopped crying so abruptly it startled Michael. She dug into her dress pocket and pulled out a crumpled napkin, the same one she'd used to wipe her tears. Unfolding it, she revealed a single strand of Rick's hair carefully twisted around a piece of tape. "Jake says hair is magic," she whispered, pressing it into Michael's palm. "Now he can't hurt us no more." Michael didn't have the heart to tell her about DNA evidence chains of custody. Instead, he tucked the napkin into his breast pocket right over his heart. "We'll mail it to Samantha. She'll know what to do." That night, 3 things happened in rapid succession. 1. Samantha called Rick's hair-matched DNA from the 47th Street warehouse, linking him directly to O'Malley's trafficking operation. 2. The judge signed a permanent termination of parental rights citing extreme moral depravity. 3. Emma built a pillow fort in Michael's living room and declared it the official No Ricks Allowed zone. As Michael sat cross-legged in the fort, eating smuggled-in sugar sandwiches now upgraded with artisanal brioche, Emma studied him with sudden seriousness. "You're not like my old dad." Michael braced for the question he'd been dreading. "Then why didn't you save me sooner?" Instead, Emma shoved the last Oreo into his mouth. "You share better." Outside, the city lights blurred through the fabric of their fort. Not the cold glow of skyscrapers anymore, but something warmer. Something like home. And when the first snow of December began to fall, it didn't bury the past. It just made the future look a little brighter. The morning of the custody hearing dawned with an unexpected twist, a blizzard that shut down half of Boston. As Michael helped Emma into her snow boots, she suddenly gasped and pointed at the TV. There splashed across the local news was Rick's mugshot alongside the headline, "Local man arrested in sting operation, human trafficking charges pending." The grainy surveillance footage showed Rick accepting a briefcase from an undercover cop, his voice crystal clear. "The kid's small, but she's strong, perfect for specialized deliveries." Emma dropped her mitten. "That's my old backpack," she exclaimed, pointing at the screen where Rick held up the Hello Kitty bag as proof of ownership. Samantha's text came through seconds later. "Merry Christmas. The DA just made our case airtight." The courtroom was packed, despite the weather reporter's curious bystanders and a surprising number of moms from Emma's new school who'd organized a Support Emma bake sale in the lobby. Rick's lawyer didn't even bother standing when the judge entered. But the real surprise came when the homeless woman from the gas station walked in, her hair neatly braided, holding a notarized statement about the day Emma shared her last dollar with her. "Ain't no monster," she declared, pointing at Michael. "Monsters don't teach kids to give when they got nothing." The judge didn't need to deliberate. As the gavel came down, Emma tugged Michael's sleeve. "Does this mean I get to keep you?" she whispered. Outside, the snow had stopped. The sun broke through the clouds, glinting off the courthouse steps and the crowd of reporters waiting with cameras raised. Michael knelt, adjusting Emma's scarf. "You want to tell them the truth?" Emma squared her shoulders, marched up to the nearest microphone, and delivered the line they'd rehearsed in the car. "My name is Emma Grant now, and my dad makes the best sugar sandwiches." The resulting photo of Michael's stunned face, of Emma's gap-toothed grin, of the homeless woman laughing in the background, would later win a Pulitzer. But for Michael, the real prize came that night when Emma taped her first-ever drawing on his fridge, a lopsided house with 3 stick figures and a dog labeled Bites. And underneath in shaky letters, home. The courtroom projector flickered to life, displaying not just the medical reports, but something far more damning. A video from Emma's teddy bear camera showed Rick slamming a beer bottle next to Jake's crib, snarling, "Should have sold you first," as the toddler wailed. The timestamp matched the night of the U-Haul incident. Judge Williams' pen clattered to the bench. Rick's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. This is illegally obtained." Actually, Samantha cut in, sliding a signed consent form across the table. Massachusetts is a one-party consent state. Emma was the one recording, and as a ward of the court, she has every right to document abuse. She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I submit Exhibit F." The screen changed again, showing Rick's Facebook messages with a user called Red Sox Fan 47. 10K for the girl. She's small but works hard. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Even the stenographer stopped typing. Michael barely had time to process before Emma did the unthinkable. She marched right up to the witness stand, still clutching her flour-dusted teddy bear, and addressed the judge in a voice that didn't shake once. "Your Honor, can I tell you what home feels like now?" Judge Williams, who'd seen 1,000 traumatized kids in her career, blinked rapidly. "Proceed, Emma." "It smells like cookies," Emma said, holding up her floury hands. "And my bed doesn't have locks. And when I have bad dreams, Uncle Mike sings this really bad song about a moose." She leaned closer, whispering loudly, "He can't even rhyme." The judge's lips twitched. Rick's lawyer looked like he'd been hit by a bus. When the ruling came permanent termination of parental rights with a side order of arrest warrants for Rick and Red Sox Fan 47, the entire courtroom erupted. The school moms cheered. The homeless woman blew her nose loudly. And Emma. She climbed onto the defense table, teddy bear held high like the Statue of Liberty's torch, and declared to the cameras, "We're getting a dog." That night, as Michael tucked her into bed in a room with 3 nightlights and 0 locks, Emma sleepily murmured, "Judge Lady liked my cookies." Michael kissed her forehead. "Kid, you're gonna run the world one day." And for the first time in his life, he couldn't wait to see the future. The morning after the ruling, Michael found Emma sitting cross-legged on his $15,000 Persian rug, surrounded by every pillow in the penthouse. She was constructing what appeared to be a fort with military precision. "It's not a fort," she informed him gravely. "It's a safe place. For when the bad dreams come." Michael knelt beside her, noticing how she'd used his favorite tie as a drawbridge. "We could get a nightlight," he offered. Emma shook her head. Her brow furrowed in concentration. "Need more, like a system." That afternoon, Michael's penthouse became a construction zone. Samantha arrived to find him elbow-deep in IKEA instructions for a bunk bed, while Emma supervised from a throne of throw pillows. "Your Honor," Samantha deadpanned, holding up a legal pad, "I present exhibit a Millionaire defeated by Scandinavian particle board." But the real transformation came at bedtime. As Michael tucked Emma into her new bed, assembled lopsidedly but standing, she handed him a handwritten list titled, "Official Safe Rules." 1. No yelling unless it's about cookies burnings. 2. Always knock before hugs. Jake says surprise hugs are scary. 3. If bad dreams come, sing the moose song, even if it doesn't rhyme. Michael was framing the list when his phone buzzed a notification from the security app. The camera feed showed Rick's brother loitering outside their building. But instead of panic, Michael felt something unexpected: certainty. He wasn't that scared kid anymore, and he wasn't alone. He texted the doorman to call the police, then peeked into Emma's room. Moonlight spilled across her face, peaceful in sleep. One arm flung protectively around Jake, who'd been temporarily staying over for 3 nights straight. On the nightstand, her teddy bear stood guard beside a plate of half-eaten cookies. Down the hall, Michael's home office, once a shrine to spreadsheets and stock reports, now displayed a single sticky note in a child's scrawl. "Dad's important work, do not touch." The city lights twinkled beyond the windows, but for the first time in his life, Michael didn't see dollar signs in their glow. He saw tomorrow, and the day after that, and 1,000 ordinary, extraordinary moments waiting to be lived. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed midnight. Or maybe it was just the sound of a heart finally finding its beat. The courtroom doors burst open with an unexpected whoosh, not from drama, but from Emma herself, barreling in like a tiny hurricane with her Hello Kitty backpack. She skidded to a stop in front of Judge Williams' bench and plopped down a mason jar filled with crayon-written notes. "Exhibit A," she announced proudly. "Proof I'm happy." The judge, hiding a smile, uncapped the jar to find hundreds of slips of paper. "Today, Dad let me put sprinkles on his tie. It looked better. Jake ate a whole carrot. No bad dreams for 17 sleeps." Rick's lawyer objected. "Your Honor, this is hardly—" "Overruled," said Judge Williams, holding up a note that read, "Dad cried during Moana. It was embarrassing." Samantha didn't even bother with legal arguments. She simply pressed play on her laptop a video of Emma's first ballet recital. The footage showed Michael in the front row sobbing into a handkerchief as Emma spun wildly offbeat, her tutu askew. The judge's eyes suspiciously glistened. When Rick took the stand, his voice cracked. "I just want my daughter back." "Liar." A voice rang out. The entire courtroom turned to see the homeless woman from the gas station standing in the back, holding a greasy paper bag. "You sold her shoes for drug money." She tossed the bag to the bailiff inside, where Emma's tiny sneakers pawn shop tag still attached. The gavel came down like thunder. "Permanent custody granted to Michael Grant." That night they celebrated not at some fancy restaurant, but at the grimy diner where Michael used to steal ketchup packets as a kid. Emma smeared syrup on everything, while Jake discovered the existential joy of free refill soda. As the waitress handed Michael the check, she did a double take. "Hey, weren't you that little boy who— vanilla shake extra whipped cream?" Michael finished sliding a $500 tip under his plate. "Yeah, that was me." Emma, sticky-faced and triumphant, climbed onto the booth seat and raised her chocolate milk. To home. And in that moment, surrounded by the clatter of dishes, the smell of burnt toast, and the weight of a sleeping toddler in his arms, Michael finally understood what redemption tasted like. It tasted like syrup. And second chances. And love, unconditional and wild, scribbled in crayon on the walls of your soul. The morning after the ruling, Michael woke to find Emma's side of the bunk bed empty. Panic shot through him until he spotted the note taped to his forehead. "Gone to make breakfast, do not peek." He followed the trail of Cheerios to the kitchen where Emma stood on a wobbling tower of cookbooks, wielding a spatula like Excalibur. The counter looked like a flour bomb had detonated eggshells and the fruit bowl pancake batter dripping from the ceiling fan, and there in the center of it all sat a single lopsided pancake shaped like a heart. Burnt. "Surprise!" Emma beamed, her face smeared with chocolate chips. "It's adoption day." Michael's throat tightened. He hadn't told her about the paperwork waiting in his briefcase. As he took his first ceremonial bite, which somehow tasted like both charcoal and heaven, Emma climbed into his lap and whispered, "I picked a new name. Emma Grant. Like the money you give people who need it." The spatula clattered to the floor. That afternoon, they didn't go to the courthouse. They went to the gas station where it all began. The same cashier gaped as Michael, in his now syrup-stained Armani suit, bought every carton of milk in the cooler. "Pay it forward," he told the confused customers in line, handing out milk with Emma's crayon-scrawled notes tied to each one. "You matter. Today is your day. Hope tastes like chocolate." The homeless woman from that first winter was still at her corner. When Emma pressed a carton into her hands, the woman burst into tears. "Ain't you a sight, little sparrow? All grown wings." As for Rick, the system finally caught up with him, not through Michael's revenge, but through Emma's crayon testimony in family court. His sentencing hearing made the front page. "Local man gets 10-15 years in plea deal, toddler's drawings key evidence." Michael framed the article next to Emma's first stick figure family portrait. Years later, on the first night of Emma's freshman year at Harvard on a full-ride scholarship for foster youth advocates, Michael sat alone in their now too-quiet kitchen. The fridge still displayed that very first pancake preserved in epoxy by a very insistent 8-year-old. His phone buzzed. A photo from Emma, her dorm room mini-fridge stocked with milk cartons. The caption read, P.S. I kept the teddy bear. P.P.S. Moose song still sucks. Outside, the first leaves of autumn began to fall. And in that moment, Michael Grant, self-made billionaire scourge of Wall Street, the man who'd once measured his worth in square footage, understood the truest currency. It wasn't property, or power, or even justice. It was this, a fridge full of memories, a heart full of moments, and the extraordinary ordinary love that turns a house into a home.